Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Vong, and I'm part of our technical marketing team here at Okta. Today, we're going to dive into multi-branding in the Okta Customer Identity platform, more specifically, multi-brand architecture. For those of you who have extensive experience integrating your applications with our platform, I'm sure you've noticed that there are quite a few customization options when it comes to the Okta hosted sign-in page. More often than not, enterprise organizations prefer to completely style, brand that sign-in experience so that it meets their business objectives. Now, it's important to understand, again, reiterating the point here, is that the Okta hosted sign-in page has quite a few customization options, ranging from, low code using our built-in editor to highly customizable, editing your CSS, HTML, maybe even attaching your own style sheets as well. Now, for specifically the multi-branding requirements, such as, let's say, for an example, we have a parent company who has two subsidiaries. They desire a separate login experience for each of these companies, and they want to do this in a single Okta tenant. Now, in the past, we would have had to maybe consider a more custom solution, like building out our own sign-in pages for each company and then using the Okta APIs behind the scenes to provide authentication. That is no longer the case today. With the current evolution of the Okta hosted sign-in page, we can support this use case of multi-branding with many different approaches. Now, while there are multiple ways to solve this problem, the decision to go down one route over the other really depends on a few factors. Now, on our Okta hosted sign-in page, we as the developers have access to a variety of different contextual variables that can help us determine how to style the widget or the page itself. These contextual controls can be categorized into two different group types. The first one is the Okta context. Think about the Okta context as really just information that's getting pulled directly from the Okta org environment and its different resources. So think about applications, maybe users, etc. The first sort of subcategory within the Okta context are fixed controls. So what we mean by fixed controls are, the tenant itself, the Okta tenant itself, the Okta tenant domain. These are fixed values that are associated with the org and typically don't necessarily change all that often. And they can be used in an effort to help style the sign-in experience to make it cater directly to, the specific Okta org. The second type is what we call a code-based context. Now, these are a little bit more dynamic. They are still coming from the Okta tenant. However, in this example, you'll see we're referencing the application ID, application label. These are values that are dynamic in the sense that, the user starts on the application, they click a login button, and then they get redirected to Okta. As part of that initial call to that request to Okta, we'll have the application's contextual information. So we'll have the application ID, the label, and we can use these pieces of metadata in an effort to style the sign-in experience from the Okta hosted sign-in page itself. Now, the second control I want to discuss would be the external context. These are sort of outside the control of Okta. So these controls are typically managed and provided by, example would be the application that the user is being redirected from, or maybe the user's local environment before ordering the request to Okta. Now, when we talk about client-side storage, so let's say that the user has some sort of preference stored in the browser in the form of maybe a cookie or local storage. Okta can leverage this piece of information to style the widget as well. And that's why you're seeing that here as part of the external context. The other option would be URL parameters. So being able to pass custom query parameters when we're making that redirect to Okta from our application, we can embed it, as part of the query string or even in the state or nonce parameters. so that we can use these elements within the widget to then style and provide specific branding according to these elements. Now, this is a dilemma. When we're talking about multi-branding, typically, again, kind of going back to that use case that I just described, a company that has maybe multiple subsidiaries or child companies, they want different branding scenarios or different login experiences. How do we best approach this? Um, it's important for us to remember three questions, and these three questions are the ones that we're going to be answering to help us determine the right path forward. So the first one is, do we need single sign-on or SSO across multiple brands and applications? If we do need SSO across multiple brands, then maybe the approach of using, multiple domains within the Okta tenant is not something that we can really use. It would just simply would not suffice because we can't SSO across multiple brands with different top level domains. Then that would push us to the next question, what level of brand customization is needed? So for maybe a low complexity, we can use the out-of-the-box code editor within the Okta UI console to provide, inline conditional statements to, render the logo, the background image, etc. However, if it's a little bit more complex, we're going to have to go ahead and say, hey, how many brands do we need to support? If it's less than, we determine an arbitrary number called, maybe five. If it's less than five at this point in time, we're going to have to or we can maybe still leverage the out-of-the-box code editor, write custom logic to be able to render and provide different specific styling elements within the sign-in widget. However, if it's more than five at that point in time, scalability is going to be an issue. We're going to have too much code in the code editor. That's when we need to consider maybe referencing asset files that are hosted on our own CDN or some sort of remote repository. Now, with that in mind, I do want to jump to a more visual demonstration to showcase how we go through the process of, answering these three questions to come to terms with, okay, great. So this is the path forward with how we're going to customize our sign-in widget. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick switch of gears here. Okay, amazing. Alrighty. So this is our Okta tenant. As you can see, we have quite a few users, groups, SSO applications, but the most important feature for us to focus on would be customizations. Let's go ahead and hit brands. And you'll see here I've defined three custom brands for us to take a look at. We have Iron Bank, Secure Bank, and Okta. Now, for the first sort of question, right, do we need SSO across multiple brands, multiple applications? If the answer is no, then you'll see each brand can have its own custom domain or set of custom domains. So if I were to click on Iron Bank, for example, and then go to domains, you'll see I have my own vanity URL set up here where it's login.ironbank.mvbuilt.com. And if I were to actually click on this, you'll see I get redirected to a customized sign-in experience. So this is still the Okta hosted sign-in page, but it's now been branded with its own background image, color scheme, and logo. And you'll see that that's reflected in theme. So I'm actually inheriting or pulling the asset files that are stored within Okta. So this is the logo, background, and then this is my color scheme. Now, if I go ahead and do the same for Secure Bank, for example, you'll see Secure Bank has its own set of assets. So we have its own logo, background image, and color scheme. And if we go to the domains, you'll see it has its own domain as well. Same footprint, but it's login.securebank.mvbuild.com, Secure Bank with its specificity. Now, if I click login.securebank.mvbuild.com, you'll see it has its own styling, its own branding. It's very unique, right, to Secure Bank, much different than Iron Bank. And again, to reiterate, they both have different domains. So SSO will not work and will not be effective. But that's okay because our requirement initially was no SSO needed. Now, let's say we do need SSO across, our applications, our brands. However, we still need that multi-branding experience that is completely required. Let's go ahead and take a look at how that could be implemented. So if I were to navigate to brands and then I click on Okta, you'll see I still have access to the default logo, background, image, color schemes. I can make edits here. And if I were to click on okta.mvbuild.com, it will still inherit all the necessary files. But you'll see this background image is a little bit different. And that is because if I go back to Pages and then I hit Configure, now you'll see we have this code editor. This is where we're able to provide a more custom approach to styling our Okta hosted sign-in page. And this goes down the path of, hey, the user does need SSO. Okay, great. So now we have to figure out the complexity of the implementation. Do we have to support multiple brands? Maybe we have 5 applications. Each application needs its own, dedicated sign-in experience with its own styling elements. Um, if it gets to that point, you'll see I do have a custom function built here within the JavaScript, get client ID. With the Okta util object, I have a function here called getRequestContext. This returns this object here that essentially contains all of the contextual information that's relevant to this request. So I know that if I'm redirecting to the Okta hosted sign-in widget, in this context, I'll have access to the application itself, as well as the application's ID. And that's exactly what I'm returning in this function. I want access to the client ID or the application ID so that I can leverage it to render a specific styling element. And if I were to come down here, this is where I'm calling the method or the function. I'm placing it in a client ID itself. Now, if the client ID does exist, just as a precautionary check, what I'm doing is I'm getting the login background image container, and I'm leveraging a switch statement here. So if it matches this specific client ID, so I know that the user is coming from this application to my Okta hosted sign-in page, then I'll go ahead and change the background image to an image that I've sourced from this site. And there is also the default case here as well. Now, this is only a single case. As I was saying previously during the presentation, if we have to support more than 5 brands, at that point in time, scalability will be an issue. We don't want a switch statement with way too many cases. That just doesn't scale well. In those instances, we'll have to look to potentially, hosting our asset files externally, maybe in our own CDN, in some sort of remote repository, maybe even like an S3 bucket, and then referencing them directly in the JavaScript within our Okta hosted sign-in page code editor. So in those instances, we've seen customers and developers maybe reference their files to include the client ID and then just pass it forward in the file name so that they can reference it in like a head tag or a link within the head tag and so forth. So again, there's quite a bit of flexibility. But the notion is we have to really think about those three questions, right? Is it going to be, SSO required across multiple brands, multiple applications? Do we need a high level of complexity when it comes to styling and branding? And if we do, then how many brands do we need to support? Because at some point in time, and the number from our perspective would probably be five, then at that point, it won't really be scalable to provide five different, um, you know, switch case statements. Then we'll have to go the route of something a little bit more dynamic, having these external, again, files that we can reference within the JavaScript or the HTML itself. Now, let's take a look at what this would be, or I'm sorry, what this page would look like if I were to remove the switch statement. So let's go ahead and hit edit. All I'm going to do is comment it out so we can see that the original background image should now populate. So I'm going to go ahead and close that link, open this up, and you'll see, great, the background image was changed back. So just as a quick recap, right, we had multiple brands within a single Okta tenant. We were able to solve for that use case. If SSO was not required, we can have these two separate, brands exist. Well, in theory, all three do exist on separate domains, but SSO would not work across all three here. But if that's okay, then we can go the route of using quite a bit of out-of-the-box capabilities here and leveraging the domain as sort of a separation and distinguishment between different brands. If SSO is required for multiple brands or multiple applications, then we can actually go in here, go to our code editor, and leverage custom logic and application metadata or any other contextual information that we can leverage to produce some sort of logical condition so that we can provide that logical rendering here, or conditional rendering, if you will. And this is a very high level example of what you can do. And also important to understand that at some point in time, for us, the number is five. If there are more than five brands, we'll have to really consider, referencing those remote asset files that are stored elsewhere externally, so that we can maintain a level of scale that will work best in our production environment. Now, I do appreciate the time. And if there are any questions, please let us know. Our documentation does have a very, very strategic sort of decision flow diagram that the team put together to kind of walk through the decision-making process. That is very comprehensive, and I found it to be helpful personally, and ultimately helped me, sort of put this together in an effort to, walk you guys through and guide us through the process. So I do appreciate the time. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And in the meantime, keep on building. Thank you.